And of course, on the bottom right side of Death Aura, we're looking at the main base of the Mauer himself. This is ShoWTimE. You know, I haven't casted this tournament in so long. The last time I casted, we didn't have any fancy, cool intro music, okay? This is new to me, and I love it.
It's so wonderful. I can't wait until you hear some of the other various sound effect clips that we have for some of these player intros, because some of them just straight up nostalgia bomb me back to like the 90s or something. So
okay, so yeah, you wanted to ask me about the PvP of GungFu. Now, I have casted quite a few of his series over in the weeklies. I also played against him once or twice, once in a Wadi tournament. I think it depends a lot on who he's playing against. In this case, it is ShoWTimE. I'm expecting GungFu to do the craziest stuff. Maybe the 6 or even 8 Adept openers with an Oracle, you know, and try to kill as many workers as possible. While ShoWTimE, I mean, we know ShoWTimE, right? He's probably just going to try to figure out what kind of crazy stuff is GungFu throwing at me, and then he's going to try to defend it.
Yeah, and I think it's the other thing that you said that was pretty surprising or interesting to me, not so much surprising, was that you said GunGFuBanDa's playstyle does better versus players who are also better. So hearing about, like, you know, trying to go for adept harassment and a lot of the Oracle stuff, when I think of ShoWTimE, I think of immaculate defenses. I mean, he's known as the wall, right? But do you feel like someone with GungFu's playstyle where it's really just about trying to find these little holes in the defenses, trying to poke in with the depths, trying to find opportunities for the Oracles to get damage done is going to be as effective playstyle-wise against ShoWTimE?
I mean, if those attacks are laser sharp, I generally think they're always good. And we saw that at Stay at Home Story Cup as well, where a lot of the Korean protosses kept opening up with 8 adepts. And I was like, well, you know, how good can this really be? And then it's just like bam, 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 shade, shade, shade. And suddenly they're the ones being 9 workers ahead. And the other player can't counterattack because there are still 2 adepts out there somewhere. So these kind of builds are very good, but we don't really have to talk about it because GungFu is showing us that we know nothing. And he's opening up with 2 Stalkers, and he's following this up with the Sentry. So he's actually going for a macro-oriented approach here in Game 1. And that sets us up for maybe some of that magic that you brought to the show yesterday, Robbie. Because I've been watching all week. And yesterday, by far and away, the most epic, close, insane games. I believe in the Ravi blessing. And I am just so glad that I can be part of a Ravi blessed day as well.
Oh, well, don't worry, Kev. Not only does the Ravi blessing actually carry over to Europe, it most certainly also carries over to North America, which we're also going to be covering later today. We already see a couple of shield batteries coming up for both sides. It's a nice defensive play, which is extremely helpful these days since you have that shield battery overcharge. It can even stand up to an immortal or 2 when it's under attack. But we finally have some tech actually coming out for one of the players. We have GungFuBanDa throwing down the Robo and also getting up that fast forge, the fast +1.
Well, ShoWTimE is actually going for the Twilight. I prefer the Robo here. If ShoWTimE decides to go for a Blink, there is actually a chance that GungFu makes maybe a crazy move out with 1 Immortal and 1 War Prism. And those kind of builds I think are hard to deal with as well. Now, ShoWTimE does have a couple of sentries himself, so I don't think he's too worried about being attacked early on. I thought it was funny how you mentioned the shield battery in a little pre-show. You're like, yeah, you know, it's been making things a little bit better in PvP. I don't know how you feel about it, but I feel that the power battery has been way more effective in helping PvT pushes, PvZ all-ins, than in PvP. In PvP, the things that were very good are still pretty damn good. It does make a change, don't get me wrong, but I feel it's been more impactful in the other 2 matchups.
Yeah, I can definitely see that. I feel like in PvP, you start getting out the power units, and I feel like their damage output is just absurd. So you have some of the ability, like when you have 3 Immortals, for example, you can kind of just ignore the shield battery overcharge and start just one-shotting Stalkers. I can kind of see that.
And it's also just that people don't always have to fight near the battery, of course, right? Especially in PvP when there are some crazy builds. If there is a War Prism, if there is an Oracle out there, they're just going to try to avoid that thing. But, you know, some players will just look at it and be like, all right, I feel safer than ever before. I've always thought that the pros are crazy in PvP, man. Like, I see their expanse, I see what they scout, and I'm like, how can you be so sure that this is something you can get away with? And most of the time, they somehow manage it because they do get the follow-up scout, and I guess they're really good at reading that even if I lose my Nexus in a certain situation, it wouldn't be the end of the world if I already had more workers, if I'm teching up quicker at home. So we see a little bit of that as ShoWTimE finds his first kind of, I want to say victim, but finds his first prey, treasure, out on the map as this pylon goes down. And ShoWTimE is actually the one moving out. And he has a pylon as well on the top side that now gets scouted by GunGFu, as these adepts do get revealed as well by the pylon. This is kind of a funky move out by ShoWTimE.
Uh-oh. And it looks like these stalkers are going to find the adept right after they use their shade. So one adept is guaranteed to go down. The second adept might be able to make it out, but that's a lot of stalker output. So it looks like that one falls down as well. But ShoWTimE's push out is at least revealed. So GunGFuBanDa should be just preparing at the top of that ramp for those stalkers to move up.
Yeah, 2 adepts may not seem that expensive, but this is one of these momentum things as well that you hate, because you're like, oh, I've been revealed. I'm going to go for the super safe shade into the center. And then you just shade on top of 4 or 5 stalkers and you're just asking yourself, all right, how did that make any sense? Look at GunGFu hallucinating the War Prism there, but the stalkers actually going for the runaround as they find this Nexus. Blink is done. They don't want to settle for the Nexus, but they will settle for a stalker. Now, obviously, GunGFu is the player here that skipped Blink completely, right? He just went straight into charge, gets the War Prism. If he can really get away with this without falling economically behind in this game, I kind of like this game for GunGFu, actually.
All right, Hallucinate War Prism is making its way into the main base. We'll see if ShoWTimE reacts and does a big warp-in the main base. He's sending the sentries over, and after tagging that War Prism with the sentries, it's going to be pretty obvious. Yeah, it was just a hallucination. So not a massive
sentries are good. Sentries are good, Ravi.
They used to be, man. I don't know if you remember back in the beta of StarCraft 2 Wings of Liberty, sentries used to do like 2 more damage per shot. They actually used to just kill things. Roddy, can you imagine that?
Yes, I can, because I was playing as well back then, and basically we 4-gated with only sentries. If you tell people that right now, they will laugh at you and wonder how that's even a thing. But back then, we were winning the ESL weeklies basically by 4-gating sentries, and sentries were so powerful that even the Muslim and Lucifron, 2 Terran players, ended up playing PvP against each other because they couldn't defend the sentry attacks. That's how good sentries were.
And for context, people didn't even know that force field was good at the time.
Well, yeah, you know, like they spam them and then we'll just kind of see what happens. So at this point, ShoWTimE knows that he kind of needs to get a little value out of his stalkers, right? I'm not going to say that he's in a dire position because he's up a couple workers. He still knows that GunGFu is at his side of the map. But if you invest in Blink, if you make all these stalkers, you want to see a little return of your initial investment. And if that's by 4 stalkers into the main base, sniping probes, awesome. If that's by buying time, that's awesome too. If he just lets GunGFu march to the other side of the map, I actually think GunGFu has a good shot at winning the fight.
Yeah, he just finished up his +2 weapons. Now, I think ShoWTimE should have his own +2 weapons finished up before GunGFu could make it across the map. But these stalkers, like you said, are already buying a little bit of time. Charge is still going to be able to guarantee a connection on some of the stalkers, even after they blink further back. So a couple of these stalkers are starting to fall in exchange for a zealot or 2. But like you said, it is about buying time here. ShoWTimE now has his own +2 weapons finished up, has morphed in a few more Archons, is getting out a few Immortals of his own.
Yeah, Archons are everything in a lot of these silly Archon Zealot fights. I don't know how you feel about it, but I'm just not that big of a fan. You see these 2 massive armies run into each other, and I often feel like at one point, you're like, all right, I'm going to let my army fight, and then I'm going to pick up low HP Archons with my Prism. That's kind of the majority of the micro that takes place in those fights. GunGFu is actually still transitioning behind all of this, as he is going up to 4 bases too. He's getting a Dark Shrine. He fired up +3 melee immediately as well. He's kind of pretending that this was this all-out attack that he was gearing up for, but I don't really see him going too crazy and going up a ramp and fighting in range of a shield battery, because this is actually still where shield battery overcharge would be super effective, because if you have an Archon there, I mean, there isn't that much burst damage in the army of GunGFu, right? Because Archons don't have that much range. Immortals don't deal crazy damage on Archons. So this is not really the kind of fight you want to take in range of a super battery.
I hope you're right now, Kev, because GunGFuBanDa is making this look like a very, very convincing argument that he's about to attack in. And he's actually going to go ahead and commit. And he decides to back off after taking a few losses over here, especially with the shield battery overcharge. Yeah, I'm with you, Kev. I do not really like the idea of GunGFuBanDa committing in.
No, like I did kind of think there his initial positioning, I was like, maybe, right? Because a lot of the Protoss units, I mean, I'm not body shaming over here, Ravi, but they're a bit fat. So it's kind of hard to get down that ramp for all of them and then start participating in the fight. But I also understand when GungFu sees that battery and he's like, oh, can I take that out immediately? Is this really a fight that I want to commit into when I've got a Robo Bay on the way, when I am actually a little bit ahead in my +3 as well? I think it was a wise decision for him to turn around there.
I feel like it's just an entire other skill set to determine who has a better army in PvP sometimes, because I feel like PvP is one of those matchups where once you get into the big charge lot Archon balls in the late game and you have this many Archons, it's not super obvious because the Zealots just kind of take up space and they die almost instantaneously. So we're going to end up seeing a lot of those Zealots already fallen on ShoWTime's side right now as the Archons on the front line here for GunGFuBanDa. Another Warpin from the Warp Prism also going to be coming in with some more Zealots to reinforce. I do think that ShoWTime is making some pretty good headway on the left-hand side.
Yeah, I mean, that battery put in overtime, because if it wasn't for that battery, I really think ShoWTime would have lost a lot more Archons. This was technically a really good fight for GungFu, but I think turned around. The second Purification Nova is good though, but he does end up losing pretty much all of his Archons. Both players having a lot of money in the bank there. Ravi, if it wasn't for that super battery, I'll guarantee you that is a massive victory for GungFu, because his positioning was better and he was the one getting much better shots up with his Archons as well. It's just that ShoWTime had 2 units on the left side that refused to die because of that super battery.
And it's like you were saying exactly before, Roddy. Those Archons just have enough hit points and don't really take extra damage from any unit whatsoever. So they get healed up in an insane rate and are able to actually stay alive and tank the damage like the shield batteries really want them to. Now we do have ShoWTime with his own Dark Train now finished up. Is actually going for DT Blink as well, which always makes me a little bit happy. We might end up seeing a little bit of DT Harass later on. And I just do want to know, both these players do have some cannons kind of spread around, but I think most of GungFuBanDa's bases only really have the one cannon, sometimes two. So there's still a few openings there.
I do want to ask you though, now that DT Blink became this popular, do you already have something new that you get excited over? Because I feel like you're kind of the guy who was like a fan of the band, but then the band blew up and he's like, I used to like them when they were small, you know? And that's kind of DT Blink, you know? Come on, Robbie.
You are both giving me too much and too little credit here. I am now working on my big anime meme of how I just rub it in everyone's faces about every single time I've called it correctly, that DT Blink was going to become a standard staple for every Protoss player. Now is
to be fair, it used to be more expensive and take longer though, right?
That's true, but they changed that like 2 to 3 years ago.
Details, Ravi, details.
All right, that's a nice cancel.
Yep. Now, ShoWTime suddenly is maxed out. Like I said before, he was floating a lot of money. Yeah. GungFu is actually kind of struggling to max out. He is down 15 workers, but at this point, if you're on 4 bases, this is pretty much 4 base saturation. So it's not like he's overly saturated. Only on his 4th base, I'd say that GungFu can definitely get a few more workers. He ends up losing a few more probes as well. Man, how did this game suddenly get so good for ShoWTime? Is it just the economic lead that he's always had?
I mean, he also did win that fight and force back a lot of GungFuBanDa's units, I feel like. And remember, he also sniped out off a few disruptors here and there, and then was able to immediately safely expand, whereas GungFuBanDa tried to get a much later one. Oh, disruptors get some pretty decent hits. Oh my god, even the stalkers that are in range of the disruptors don't feel comfortable attacking there.
Yeah, that was really cool that he left one shot actually behind, so he knew that he was going to be safe and the stalkers couldn't possibly go for the follow-up blink forward. Now GungFu is going to try to transition into Skytoss, but Ravi, I think he's a bit too broke for this, man. ShoWTime is not going to let him get up to 5 bases. If we do have these armies clashing one more time, this Immortal will fall. But ShoWTime's got so many Dark Templars set up at 9 o'clock, so this base will never go up. A couple of additional units even getting picked off there. I really don't know if this is the moment you want to go into carriers when you're at 135 supply and you're struggling to max out.
Yeah, I feel it's one of those strange situations where there isn't a critical mass of disruptors where you can start making comebacks happen. And I do wonder, like, do you feel like 7 disruptors is enough for GungFuBanDa to make something happen? And this is what I mean. 2 cannons not going to be enough for this many DTs. Unless you shield battery overcharge.
Apparently. Now we've got DTs against DTs fighting each other. I don't see an observer here on the side of ShoWTime, so He definitely needs to get the hell out of there. Purification Novas blowing up a disruptor there for GungFu. Now, GungFu's mothership is out. I know the meme, guys, -400, -400. But I gotta say, motherships in situations like this are obviously very good, right? That permanent cloaking of the army, making it harder for the enemy to see where the disruptors are. It's not a bad initial investment, but I don't think that GungFu really has the army right now to capitalize on the fact that he's got a mothership, right? Motherships are great, but he's down like almost 40 army supply. I think that's a bit too much for him to ever get adventurous and move out.
Yeah, let me ask you, do you feel like the mothership, even if it's not necessarily going to win him a fight, it will buy him enough time to start maxing out? Because right now, ShoWTimE's army, he's getting up a fleet beacon. It'll eventually be stronger. It's not going to be stronger until he actually starts trading out, though, right?
I don't know if GungFu can max out. GungFu, I think, is going to end up losing more workers. The Dark Templars are going to try their luck one more time, by the way, at the fourth base of GungFu. This is a really important one, because this is the most fresh mineral line there is. A lot of probes are going to go down, 18 already, and there is a chance that ShoWTimE even gets the Nexus. That's kind of, I guess that answers your question, right? I just don't think he can max out.
And I think, especially after losing that base, that is going to be the case, but...
That's kind of cool as well. Yeah, I love it. Blinking into the main base with the observer there, taking out a few more cannons. There is still one observer here for GungFu, but needless to say, this has already been very painful. Losing a lot of buildings, losing a lot of probes. GungFu is running out of patience, so he's going to try to run into the army of ShoWTimE. But as we all know, it is so hard to force a fight when your opponent is sitting on a lot of disruptors. I mean, how do you get close to that army? I don't know.
And even ShoWTimE losing this high-yield gas base is not really going to matter that much, because while ShoWTimE is losing one base, GunGFuBanDa has lost 2 bases, and he was already down a base. This is a really, really dire spot. And actually, ShoWTimE is comfortable just saying, yeah, I'll just go and kill the rest of your stuff also, because by the time you finally get to my other final bases, I can just recall back home and deal with your army.
Yep, well, GungFu does do obviously a good job here in finally taking out a couple probes and taking out 2 bases in total. But ShoWTimE is already building Tempest, and there is nothing in GungFu's army that's good against Tempest. Uses the recall, but leaves a couple of Archons behind. Just kind of wants to clean up this army all together at once. With the Disruptors coming in from the right side, there is a chance indeed that GungFu wins this fight, but ShoWTimE is just going to disengage. You know, it's not so much about this army, Ravi. It's about what ShoWTimE has at home. What he has at home is a perfect counter against what GungFu has. And on top of that, ShoWTimE is still rich and GungFu is not.
Yeah, I mean, we already have Tempest number 4, 5, and 6 going to be popping out in a second. So 1, 2, and 3 are just chilling down in the bottom left so far. And GunGFuBanDa, I think he decided to, I guess, get some more saturation in his natural again. But he just has not had the resources to retake any expansions. At this point, he's pretty much committed, right? The 400 minerals he saved up, he is going to throw that into a Nexus, because I guess that is something he has to have. But I almost wouldn't have hated if he just threw it into more army, because I feel like he is hyper all in now.
Yeah, no, I'm with you. I think it's one of these moments where there's not really a right decision. GungFu is going to try to make some magic happen, but he ends up losing a few more stalkers. Yeah, the army is indeed very far out of position, but this base is not that important anymore for ShoWTimE. What's a lot more important is obviously his main production and the Tempest and stuff. Now, this can get a little bit awkward. Technically, GungFu has double recall, right? Like, he can recall home, he can recall something back if he leaves the mothership behind. I don't know. We'll see. This PvP is going to get a little bit crazy, but I don't really want to hype this up, because ShoWTimE is still so far ahead in this game. It's really hard to put it in words.
Yeah, Kev, I really do wonder, if GunGFuBanDa is able to get in on top of the production, it does sort of invalidate a little bit of the bank there. And then he just has to overcome, 30 or 40 army supply lead for ShoWTimE, which it's not ideal. It's not easy. I feel like PvP is a matchup where I could see something like that happening.
There are moments where I would definitely agree with you, but how do you get in range of 8 Tempests with the army that GungFu has? That's the biggest concern. Like, if the Archons can get somehow under the Tempest, oh, I'm with you, right? Because then 1 or 2 Purification Novas, bam, bam, anything is possible. I just don't see ShoWTimE making a mistake that big that he would expose all his Tempests.
All right. One thing I do want to keep an eye on is the observer count, just because there is still a little bit of potential maybe for something along those lines. But so far, oh no, GunGFuBanDa is in kind of awkward spot, because you were talking about double recall, sure, but with GunGFuBanDa trapped up the ramp, he's going to be engaging down a ramp. This gets really, really awkward, especially when you start talking about those Tempests you were mentioning, where they're just going to be able to pick away at this army from afar and force a fight that GunGFuBanDa does not want to take right now.
Nope. But, you know, well, what are you going to do? Either you stand there and let him shoot at him, or you chase the army. But we already went over it. You don't chase armies that have a lot of disruptors, because the retreating army is just firing forward, one purification nova at a time. Here we can see some of this beautiful display of the Tempest so far. And the fight that you're hoping for, Rafi, it's not even going to happen. ShoWTimE is too good. He's not going to give GunGfu that kind of a fight. GG gets called. ShoWTimE displaying the power of range. Very well done there.
Very, very well done. And like you said, just securing that lead and just keeping it in a really, really solid position. I mean, we saw him skyrocket ahead in supply for a while, but then you were mentioning he was just making all the right moves. He was doing the tech transition he needed to at the right time to deal with the mothership and everything else. Having the Tempest there just pick away at the army. ShoWTimE was able to just play so patiently because of all the decisions he was making.
But I think it's the most bizarre thing after that crazy fight happened, right? Where, you know, ShoWTimE barely defended, where this power battery, the super battery, the giga battery, call it however you want it. I think it healed up probably for like 2,000 hit points, by the way. Like, it was going insane on a couple of Archons on the left side. After that fight, GunGfu was like 130 supply. And I feel GunGfu stayed at 130 supply for the next 9 minutes in that game while trying to get a mothership, trying to get carriers out and stuff. It just wasn't meant to be. And ShoWTimE, as quickly as he spent his bank, I mean, he was maxed out and he kind of stayed maxed out as well.
Yeah. Well, funny enough, that wasn't exactly the game that I was expecting. I don't know if that was the kind of game that you were expecting for ShoWTimE versus GunGFuBanDa. It ended up being a pretty passive game where both players were macroing up. I think that both players had gotten up their third bases before they really did any kind of actual exchanges together, outside of maybe a little bit of minor Blink Stalker harassment from ShoWTimE. So, I mean, are you expecting another similar game in game number 2, or are you thinking it's probably going to be a bit more aggressive like PvP tends to be?
I actually think that GunGfu might be a little crazier over here. Eternal Empire, I think, is one of the more defense-oriented maps, though. Like, yeah, proxy targets can be powerful on this map, and the 3-gate robo, because there's no real ramp going into the natural, can always be a threat. But I still think that GunGfu, after the previous game, he's like, man, he went Blink, I skipped Blink, I didn't really take that much damage of his Stalkers, and I didn't win the game. That's not a good place to be in, because whenever you skip Blink, you always feel like, yeah, got away with it. You know, quicker upgrades, slightly quicker forge, more immortals. This should be my game. Maybe he does look at that game and be like, I felt like I played well. I just underestimated the power of a super battery, I guess. Because it wasn't just that GunGfu's army was good there. It was that his positioning at that big fight at the fort base of ShoWTimE was so damn good as well. But it wasn't meant to be. Top right side, guys. The man, as I often say, he's made out of raw German steel and twisted sex appeal. It's GunGFuBanDa.
And down in the bottom left, we have the red Protoss player with German engineering carrying him forward to a 1-0 lead. It is ShoWTimE. Okay, Roddy. So it sounds like you're not a huge fan of usually of the Twilight Council openings because you feel like
I am. No. No. I love the Twilight openings, but I do think whenever you open Twilight, there are a couple of pushes that are really hard to deal with. Now, GunGfu didn't want to get too carried away with it, but I think Twilight is great if you're a great player. Because you know that you can't just make Blink Stalkers and not do anything with them. You're putting yourself in a position where, all right, I'm going to need to make some plays, and they don't have to be the sickest, insane plays or the sexiest play of the year, but you need to get a little bit of value. You need to be active, you need to be mobile, and try to get a couple of minor pickups here and there.
I understand. You don't think that ShoWTimE is a great player, so you don't think you should be
Wow. Not in a million years would I ever say something that crazy, Ruben.
Wow. Yeah. Well, I'm just kidding, of course, but yeah, I think you mentioned before the last game that the big difference of what you were talking about, all the adept harassment and everything, did happen with the first 2 gateway units that came out that kind of showed that it probably wasn't going to be that. And we once again actually do see from GunGFuBanDa, it's not going to be double Stalker this time. It's going to be Stalker Sentry. But usually that's not how you open if you're thinking about doing some of that adept harass, right?
No, absolutely not. This kind of just screams, I want to expand, and I want to expand in a greedy manner. I guess if you have an early battery on the low ground, you're always kind of safe here, and this is a bigger map, but I think Stalker Sentry is kind of a greedy opening. Good scout here, of course, by ShoWTimE. Sees the units that came out, and now even keeps the probe alive. I have no idea how you can do that. Spot the first 2 gateway units that come out, keep the probe alive, and he didn't even warp in a fake pylon to scout with it. What a guy.
All right, well, Probe's going to be able to make its way back home, and the 2 Stalkers will poke across the map. Stalker Sentry, not always great at taking on 2 Stalkers, but the other units should be making their way on out. So GunGFuBanDa should be able to hold that high ground just A-okay, fine and dandy.
Whoa,
Phoenix? Oh, that'd be a big pickoff.
Yeah, that would feel really bad if you're GunGFu. You gotta worry. Forcefield could get dangerous there. ShoWTimE overcommits, but he doesn't. He turns around just in time. We do see that battery as well on the low ground for GunGFu. Sorry, mate.
I'm a little worried that Hallucinating Phoenix is just going to die to the sentry if the sentry's in position. It's just barely a little bit too far south. I was going to say it was so low I could see a sentry kill it before it got any scouting information, but
well,
still
I watched a video once, like 99% useless facts, and you know that hallucinations do regenerate shields. So that Phoenix, even though it was super low before, it was actually gaining some HP during all of that, and it got 40 extra HP, and I think that's enough to survive a couple of sentry shots.
Are you saying that hallucinated units have infinite health, Roddy? They can regenerate?
Mm-hmm.
They just have an infinite amount of health? That's unbelievable. Can't believe more people don't use hallucinations.
Well, that should be your next thing after Phoenix DT.
You know, I remember there was one time I got so excited because back when it was... You know, it was Blink Stalker Disruptor was the meta, and it was starting to transition over to like Charge Lot Archon. If you remember, like that little time period in between, where Blink Stalker Disruptor was just getting completely trounced by Charge Lot Archon. I got really excited one time. Actually, he's going to be able to get some nice damage in over here. Even with the shield battery killing off 3 workers, not bad.
Yep.
But I remember messaging Hearthstone and saying, like, I just thought of the best way you can still make Blink Stalker Disruptor happen. All you have to do is get up like 6 sentries and hallucinate probes and hold position them, and they'll have the lowest attack priority of everything in your army. So you can actually create a wall between you and your opponent's charge lots and still use your disruptors effectively.
and then they wait 10 seconds and you spend 600 gas and you're in a lot of trouble, aren't you?
Arsama's just like, mate, please, come on.
I mean, it is a very cool idea, and I actually saw this yesterday when somebody knew that they were going to lose a couple of probes against Adepts, or the day before they hallucinated like 8 fake probes. And against Adepts, that's kind of cool, right? Because Adepts attack really slow, so if they shoot at the wrong probes, I mean, that really stinks because those Adepts will go down. So I was like, that's actually a very clever play. I like it.
Yeah, I like that. And they say there's no RNG in StarCraft. You introduced it yourself.
Yeah, we'll make it.
All right.
Both players actually going Blink this time, as we see even GunGFu opening up with Twilight here, adding a lot of gateways as well, a little bit quicker than ShoWTimE is. Maybe he's going to get a little aggressive with Blink Stalkers, proxying a gateway as well on the bottom side of the map. All right, I like this. I mean, it's still aggression, just different aggression than we expected initially.
Oh, but that proxy gate is actually going to get found by this Stalker. Looks like the Stalker's just going to go straight after the pylon rather than the probe. So the probe might be able to sneak around and maybe throw down a backup pylon once this one gets depowered if the rest of the army makes it here. But I don't think GunGFuBanDa is going to make it here in time to really salvage anything, as not only is the pylon probably going to go down the gateway, it should be pretty soon to fall afterwards if it doesn't get canceled right now.
You know what's even worse about losing the pylon in the gate is that it kind of reveals your game plan. Like, you obviously hope that ShoWTimE gets a little bit too greedy, too carried away. Now, ShoWTimE is a bit out of position, but GunGFu didn't have all of his units here, so GunGFu is actually the one ending up losing at least one Stalker. Could lose the second one here if he's not careful. He does pick it up. But I think at this point, ShoWTimE is like, all right, I am not building any probes because I see what's happening. He got a second defensive shield battery as well. With the Immortal, it's kind of now or never for GunGFu, but I have the feeling that it's going to be never. I don't know how you transition out of this, but I think he has to.
Oh, Kev, I don't know how you make this push work. It's 12 Stalkers for ShoWTimE. He has a Stalker lead, and he has Immortals in the mix with nearly the same number of sentries. It just... Raw number-wise, this should never work for GunGFuBanDa moving up a ramp into shield batteries. I agree. You got to transition, but with no third base, with no other tech, I guess he's just going to start up +2 weapons and try to find something he can do.
I think you'll like this. When you're in this kind of position, right, for GunGfu, you know what the only choice is? Take the base with the rich Vespian gas. He needs a comeback mechanic, and the only way he's ever going to catch up in Archons is by taking the rich Vespian guys.
Yeah, I don't hate it. Would you just use it in like on getting way more Archons than possible?
Yeah.
Or hold that thought.
Yeah, just trying to go into Archon Stalker. The War Prism actually gets sniped immediately. I mean, the force fields are kind of good, but eventually GunGfu is going to run out of force fields, and this army of ShoWTimE is still stronger and still very much so alive.
Oh man, the force field does come down a little bit too far back, and GG is going to get called. ShoWTimE